I was lying in a cold hospital room, attached to a monitor whose quiet beeping sounded like a countdown to my end. The doctors told me I had less than 48 hours if we couldn't stabilize the bleeding. Terrified, I called my mother, begging her to come. But her voice on the line was flat, distant, and completely devoid of warmth. She said, "Stop being dramatic, Maya. Your sister's wedding rehearsal is tonight, and she needs us more." Then she hung up. They left me to die alone in that room, choosing a party over my life.
But I didn't die.
And 3 weeks later, when I walked into my sister's lavish reception completely unannounced, I handed my mother a single folded note. The second her eyes read those words, her smile vanished, her face turned ghost white, and she collapsed to her knees right in front of everyone. Welcome back to BT Revenge Tales. Make sure to subscribe, hit that notification bell, and comment down below the city or country you're watching from so I can reply to as many of you as possible. My name is Maya Reynolds, and at 28 years old, I had long accepted my role in the family. I was the invisible daughter, the reliable, self-sufficient one who never asked for help, while my younger sister, Chloe, was the golden child. Whatever Chloe wanted, Chloe got, no matter the cost. But nothing could have prepared me for that Thursday night. A sharp, unbearable agony tore through my abdomen, collapsing me to the floor. Hours later, I was hooked up to 4 lines in a sterile hospital room, struggling to stay conscious. The doctor's voice was grave. My appendix had ruptured, causing severe internal infection. They needed to operate immediately, but my blood pressure was dropping dangerously low. Petrified and facing the real possibility that I might not survive the night, I dialed my mother's phone with shaking fingers. When Brenda answered, I sobbed, begging her to come to the hospital. But there was no worry in her voice, only cold irritation. "Stop being so dramatic, Maya," she snapped, sighing heavily into the receiver. "It's probably just food poisoning. Chloe's wedding rehearsal dinner is tonight, and she needs us more right now. We can't drop everything for your little headaches." Before I could even plead for my life, the line went dead. The doors to the operating room swung shut, and for the next 3 hours, surgeons fought to save my life while I lay completely alone under the harsh fluorescent lights. When I finally woke up in the recovery ward, weak and tethered to pulsing monitors, the silence in the room was deafening. Hours turned into 2 full days. My phone sat motionless on the bedside table, not a single call, not a text, not even a brief message from my mother or sister asking if I had survived. Desperate to feel connected to the outside world, I picked up my phone with trembling hands and opened social media. There they were. Dozens of glowing photos from Chloe's rehearsal dinner and bridal shower. My mother was beaming in a designer dress, clinking champagne glasses, and captioning the posts about her perfect, complete family. Tears stung my eyes. A veteran nurse named Sarah gently walked in, adjusting my foredrip. She noticed the screen, then looked at my empty room, her eyes filled with deep sympathy. "Honey," Sarah whispered softly, placing a warm hand on my shoulder. "Sometimes the hardest part of healing isn't the physical pain. It's realizing who doesn't deserve a seat at your table." 4 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. Walking into my quiet apartment, every step was a painful reminder of how fragile my life had just been. I needed to sort through my medical insurance paperwork, so I opened the heavy steel lockbox my father had left me before he passed away 3 years ago. While searching through the folders, my fingers brushed against a thick, sealed document buried deep at the bottom, something I had completely forgotten about in my grief back then. It was a legally binding trust agreement created by my father just months before his death. As I scanned the dense legal language, my heart began to race. My father had designated me as the sole trustee of his substantial estate. That meant I held total authority over the family home my mother currently lived in, as well as the $150,000 trust fund that was actively financing Chloe's lavish, high-end wedding. My mother had always claimed Dad left her in full financial control, but the signatures on these official deeds proved otherwise. I wasn't just the forgotten daughter. I was actually the rightful keeper of everything they were so casually enjoying. Turning the pages of the trust, I uncovered an even darker truth. My mother had been illegally forging my signature for years, secretly liquidating trust funds to maintain her lavish lifestyle and finance Chloe's dream wedding. She had assumed I was far too passive and broken to ever look into Dad's private files. Then my eyes caught a specific clause buried near the back. My father had known how manipulative my mother could be. He had inserted a strict protective clause. If I ever suffered a major, life-threatening medical emergency and my family demonstrated gross negligence or abandonment, I was granted immediate, absolute authority to freeze every single asset, revoke all unauthorized distributions, and demand full financial restitution. My mother had left me to suffer alone in that cold hospital room while spending my stolen inheritance on silk dresses and expensive champagne. She genuinely believed she had gotten away with it. The very next morning, I met with Dad's estate attorney. Together, we drafted a formal, legally binding revocation notice, a simple, sleekly folded note that was about to strip away everything they had ever stolen from my father and me. 3 weeks later, the night of Chloe's wedding reception arrived. The Grandview Country Club was breathtaking, filled with shimmering crystal chandeliers, massive white floral arrangements, and over 100 wealthy guests sipping vintage wine. I stood in the doorway, still pale and recovering from surgery, but wearing a tailored black suit that made me feel invincible. Taking a deep breath, I walked into the crowded ballroom, holding my head high. The joyous chatter slowly died down as guests began to notice me. My mother's eyes widened in sudden shock across the room. Dropping her glass of champagne, she marched toward me, her face contorted with embarrassment. Chloe hurried right behind her, clutching her heavy silk gown. "What on earth are you doing here, Maya?" Brenda hissed in a furious whisper, grabbing my arm tightly to pull me into a corner. "You look hideous, and you're ruining your sister's special night. We didn't invite you, so turn around and leave right now." I didn't flinch. I calmly reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek, white envelope. "I'm not staying, Mom," I said smoothly, my voice echoing across the quiet room. "I just came to drop off a little wedding gift." Without saying another word, I placed the smooth, white envelope directly into my mother's hands. Brenda glared at me, assuming it was just a bitter letter, but she tore it open anyway. As her eyes scanned the top page, the smug expression on her face vanished. The document inside carried the official crest of the state court, backed by immediate bank revocation orders. Because of her illegal forgery and gross negligence, every single asset had been frozen effective immediately. The $150,000 trust fund paying for the caterers, the open bar, and the venue was officially locked, and criminal fraud charges were being filed against her. This can't be real," Brenda stammered, her voice shaking violently as all the color drained from her face. Chloe snatched the paper, reading the stark legal reality out loud, before letting out a horrified scream. Before anyone could react, the country club's general manager stepped into the center of the ballroom, flanked by 2 security officers. "Mrs. Reynolds," the manager announced loudly into the silent room, "your payment has just been declined, and the bank has issued a fraud hold. We are shutting down this event immediately." Brenda's knees gave out, and she collapsed to the floor in front of all her guests, weeping hysterically. I turned around and walked out of the country club, leaving behind the screaming, the chaos, and the total ruin of Chloe's dream wedding. As the heavy doors shut, I finally felt the suffocating weight lifted off my chest. Over the next few months, my attorney successfully recovered every dollar my mother had stolen from Dad's estate. Facing criminal charges and a massive mountain of debt, Brenda was forced to sell her home to pay me back, while Chloe had to move into a tiny, cramped apartment with her new husband. I cut all ties with both of them forever, using my real inheritance to buy a charming home near the ocean and start fresh in a new city. Leaving that toxic family behind was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the moment I finally reclaimed my life. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have crashed that wedding to hand over that note, or would you have handled it differently? Let me know in the comments below.